Have you ever had that creeping feeling that the world isn't quite real? Like something's watching from just beyond the screen? A stranger parrots your exact thought before you say it. The same streetlight flickers every time you walk under it. You dream of a place you've never visited, and then weeks later you're standing in it. These aren't just quirks of coincidence, they feel like glitches in the code. And lately, more and more of us are starting to notice. Maybe it's not anxiety, maybe it's not burnout, maybe it's the quiet hum of a simulation running in the background, slipping for just a second. What if the sky isn't infinite, just well rendered? What if the people in your life are running on loops? What if déjà vu is less about memory and more about rebooting? In a time when every part of our existence is tracked, curated, and filtered and monetized, the line between reality and performance has blurred into static, and through that digital haze, a disturbing question flickers into view. Are we living in a simulation? Today we're unraveling the eerie mechanics of this modern myth, from existential glitches to the algorithmic déjà vu, from tech-fueled paranoia to the strange comfort of being watched. This isn't just science fiction, this is something deeper, stranger, and far more intimate. Because whether it's real or not, we're already living like this. Chapter 1, the simulation theory, our fever dream future. Simulation theory might sound like something pulled from a dorm room debate or a late night Reddit spiral, but it's become one of the most unsettling philosophical proposals of the 21st century. Once the domain of cyberpunk fiction and conspiracy-minded message boards, it's now discussed with unnerving seriousness by scientists, tech moguls, and thinkers who shape the very reality they claim might not exist. The idea is deceptively simple, but cosmically chilling. If it's possible for an advanced civilization to create hyper-realistic simulations of consciousness, then the odds we're actually living in base reality, the real are almost non-existent. Let's go back to 2003, when philosopher Nick Bostrom of Oxford University published a paper that has since become a kind of digital Rosetta Stone, and is now a famous simulation argument. Bostrom proposed that one of three statements must be true. Either 1, all advanced civilizations go extinct before developing simulation technology. Number 2, advanced simulations develop such technology but choose not to run simulations for ethical and cultural reasons. And reason number 3, we are almost certainly living in a computer simulation right now. The logic is hypnotic, like falling down a fractal. If humanity survives long enough to build simulated worlds, complete with conscious beings like us, then it's statistically far more likely we're one of many simulations rather than the original. And it's not just ivory tower philosophers contemplating this existential riddle. Elon Musk, who builds self-driving cars and wants to colonize Mars, claimed in 2016 that there's 1 in a billion chance that we're not in a simulation. That's not the offhand musing of a guy who watches Blade Runner on repeat. That's one of the most powerful tech voices in our world, casually suggesting your entire existence might be virtual. It's a statement that seems designed to be disorienting, and perhaps that's the point. When the people designing our digital reality start questioning reality itself, what does that mean for the rest of us? This theory hits especially hard for our generation, the always online, always performing children of the internet. We were raised inside the machine. We're growing up syncing our identities with technology, watching ourselves through screens, existing as both people and profiles. It's no wonder we've started to feel like characters in someone else's simulation. Think about how many times you've experienced a moment that felt scripted, a conversation too perfect, a coincidence too precise, a sense of déjà vu so strong. Feels like you're retracing steps you've never taken. These aren't just weird moments. They're whispers from the edges of the code. We're haunted by the sense that something's off, not broken exactly, just unreal. There's a sterility to the world now, a sense of unreality in how events unfold. Politics feel like theater. Social movements are hashtagged, monetized and forgotten. Tragedies go viral, are memed and then disappear. Everything is flattened into content. You scroll through 100 lives in 5 minutes. Disaster, joy, outrage, inspiration, packaged, captioned, and filtered. It's no surprise that many of us have started to wonder if our feelings are even real anymore, or if we're just reacting to stimuli in a high-resolution sandbox, programmed for engagement. Even the culture itself has begun to glitch. Fashion trends no longer evolve, they loop. Y2K is back, then 90s minimalism, then 70s earth tones. We're recycling aesthetics so quickly, it's like the stimulation is running out of original assets. The same TikTok sounds echo across thousands of faces. Everyone starts to look the same, talk the same, think the same. The algorithm doesn't just predict what we want, it decides what we will want next. It's predictive programming disguised as choice. And what happens when the code cracks? That eerie feeling of being watched even in solitude. The uncanny moment when your phone serves you an ad for something you've only thought about. The goosebumps you get when your Spotify shuffle plays a song that describes exactly how you're feeling, down to the timestamp. These aren't necessarily proof of a simulation, but they feel like signs. Modern life has become an uncanny valley. We're no longer sure whether we're experiencing events or just being shown versions of events someone or something has pre-written. What's even more unsettling is how normalized the feeling has become. For many of us, especially Gen Z and younger millennials, the idea of living in a simulation isn't terrifying, it's comforting. It explains the absurdity of it all, the climate chaos, the capital's hell loop, the way everything feels rigged. If this is a game, at least there's an architect. If this is code, maybe there's a patch. And if it's a simulation, maybe death isn't final. Maybe nothing is. It's no longer a question if we're living in a simulation, it's how we live inside it. Do we fight it? Do we break free? Or do we lean into the illusion, turning ourselves into better players? Influencers, lifestyle coaches, crypto evangelists. They're all just people who learn to game the simulation faster than the rest of us. Then there are those who refuse to play at all. The chronically offline, the mystics, the conspiracy theorists, people who suspect the rules are a lie, or even if they can't name the game. So where does this leave us? Hovering in a kind of existential limbo, half believing, half doubting, but fully haunted. The simulation hypothesis doesn't need to be true to be effective. It's already reshaping how we see the world, how we trust our senses, how we define reality. A culture so saturated with artificiality, the boundaries between real and fake don't just blur, they dissolve. Reality is glitching, and the terrifying part is some of us prefer it that way. Chapter 2, the glitch in the self. The simulation isn't around us, it's inside us. It lives in our perception, our memories, our sense of identity, and increasingly the inner world is beginning to feel unstable. In recent years, more and more people, especially those under 35, have begun reporting a haunting and paradoxical experience, feeling both hyper-aware and strangely disconnected from their own lives. It's as if we're not participants in reality, but spectators, background characters in someone else's plot, shadows watching ourselves move through a world we no longer fully believe in. This isn't just angst or poetic melancholy, it's a clinical name, derealization, a psychological phenomenon where the external world feels distant, muted, dreamlike, or even synthetic. It's closely related to depersonalization, where you feel detached from your own body or thoughts, like you're floating just outside yourself. These experiences aren't rare anymore. They're becoming alarmingly common, especially among digital natives. One 2020 study found that nearly 50% of adults will experience derealization or depersonalization at some point or another in their lives. For younger people, the number is likely higher. The question is, why now? Many psychologists and researchers point to social media and our increasingly mediated lives as the root cause. We are the first generation to live inside our reflections. Our days are captured, filtered, and archived. We no longer just experience events, we perform them. We craft and curate an identity, not just for ourselves, but for an invisible audience, where the protagonist of a story is constantly being broadcast, judged, and edited in real time. Our social media feeds function as modern-day mythologies, where we are both gods and sacrifices. And what happens when every moment is performed? When every thought is captioned and commodified, we begin to lose the thread of what's real. The way we process memories has changed. Vacations aren't remembered through smells, sensations, or spontaneous joy, but through square photos, carefully selected and posted at golden hour. Our friendships live in screenshots. Our breakups happen through text. Even grief is now aestheticized, flattened into black and white posts and curated sadness. We're mourning in 1080p, crying through ring lights. This is where the self begins to glitch, because we no longer know whether we are living for ourselves or for the feed. And the platforms we inhabit, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, are designed not to reflect reality, but to distort it. We see ourselves through warped lenses, literally. Beauty filters elongate our faces, whiten our teeth, lift our cheekbones. Over time, these tweaks become expectations, and expectations harden into dissatisfaction. A study in 2021 found that constant exposure to face filters is directly linked to body dysmorphia and lowered self-esteem. We're comparing ourselves not just to others, but to the idealized versions of ourselves that never even existed. This digital doubling creates a kind of psychological uncanny valley. We see ourselves reflected back at us, but slightly off, too perfect, too curated, too staged. And that disconnect builds into something stranger, a deep, vibrating sense that we're losing touch with the original self. That we become avatars of ourselves, proxies with Wi-Fi. Even language reflects this shift. Think about how often we describe life in tech terms. I'm buffering today. She's totally glitching. This week doesn't feel real. These aren't just jokes, they're cultural symptoms, indicators of how digital logic has colonized the way we think, feel, even dream. The human brain was never meant to process this much input, this much comparison, this much distortion. We were not designed to be observed at all times. We were not made to construct identities in real time for an unseen audience. There's something deeply vulnerable, almost tragic, about this version of selfhood. Because deep down, we crave authenticity, not just the performance of it, but the visceral, unfiltered version. And yet, we're trapped in a cycle that rewards the opposite. Vulnerability becomes content, suffering becomes a branding opportunity. Even healing must be aesthetically pleasing, hashtag and monetize. The more we perform our lives, the more those lives begin to feel alien. Have you ever looked at a photo of yourself and thought, that's me, but not really? Or watched a video of yourself and cringed, not because you looked bad, but because it felt like watching a stranger in your skin? That's the glitch. That's the moment the simulation slips. In a society where our digital selves are more visible and more valuable than our physical ones, it's easy to feel like a ghost in the machine. We are hyper-connected yet deeply lonely, surrounded by content but starved for connection. We scroll endlessly through other people's lives, comparing ourselves to them while curating our own, creating a feedback loop of envy, aspiration, and numbness. This emotional numbing, this sense that nothing feels real anymore, might be the ultimate consequence of the simulated self. Because if every experience is filtered, every emotion mediated, and every version of you edited for mass appeal, then what remains? Who are we when the Wi-Fi cuts out? What happens when we're left alone with the raw, unperformed version of ourselves? For many, that's a terrifying question. And rather than sit with that discomfort, we plug back into the feed, scrolling, posting, and reshaping. Anything to avoid the silence beneath the noise. Anything to delay the realization that we might have forgotten how to feel without being watched. And yet, buried beneath all that digital distortion is something deeply human. A longing to be seen. Not liked, not followed, not envied, but truly seen. And perhaps that's why the simulation theory feels so resonant now. It captures the eerie, unspoken suspicion that something essential has been lost, that our realities, both inner and outer, are being shaped by forces beyond our control. The glitch in itself isn't just technological, it's spiritual, existential, a quiet unraveling of identity in a world that rewards performance over presence. And until we confront that tension, we'll keep drifting further into the simulation scrolling, performing, pretending to feel real in a world that no longer believes in itself. Chapter 3, When Pop Culture Wakes Up. The question, what is real, has haunted pop culture like a ghost in the machine, whispering through film reels, flickering in static, repeating in pixels. It's a question that doesn't just unsettle, it unravels. And over the past few decades, some of the most iconic cultural narratives have dared to ask it aloud, but their answers, they aren't comforting. Take The Matrix, perhaps the most literal and enduring interpretation of simulation horror. Neo's awakening is violent, jarring, and nauseating. He doesn't escape to paradise. He wakes up in a pod filled with viscera, tubes, and despair. Reality is a wasteland, cold, gray, and brutal. And yet, it's also true. The red pill becomes a modern symbol for painful awareness, even as it's been co-opted and weaponized by online subcultures. But at its core, the film isn't just about rebellion against the system. It's about the terror of confronting the lie you've built your entire life around, about what it means to lose the comfort of illusion and gain the burden of truth. Or consider The Truman Show, a pastel nightmare wrapped in a 1950s sitcom shell. Truman Burbank is a star of a TV show he doesn't know he's on. His life is perfect, so perfect it should have raised alarms. Everyone smiles too much. The weather obeys him. Even his grief is prescripted. But it takes years for him to see the seams. When he finally breaks through the painted sky and finds the literal edge of his world, the film asks a haunting question. Would you really want to know if your life was fake? Or is it easier to keep believing in the beautiful lie? This theme of simulated safety versus harsh truth echoes through more recent pop culture too. Black Mirror explores the psychological toll of digital distortion, technology as both mirror and mask. In episodes like San Junipero and Playtest, reality becomes negotiable, customizable, and terrifying. And Westworld, with its robot host and maze-like structure, blurs the lines between consciousness and code. The host believes they are alive until they realize their memories are loops and their desires are programmed. It's not just the horror of being trapped, it's the deeper dread of not knowing you're trapped. Even media aimed at younger audiences has become threading this needle, almost like it's trying to pressure us for a life inside the simulation. In the movie Barbie, our pink-clad protagonist begins in a world of plastic perfection. Everything is curated, everything is safe, but then something glitches. Her feet go flat. Her thoughts shift, the simulation cracks, and what follows is a descent into existential chaos. Barbie leaves Barbieland, expecting reality to be empowering, but finds it messy, indifferent, and painfully human. Her awakening is beautiful but tragic. She gains personhood at the cost of her protected fantasy. The film asks not whether we can live in a simulation, but whether we should. In Coraline, a deceptively whimsical tale hides a darker truth. The other world is a near-perfect replica of Coraline's real life, only better, more vivid, more attentive, more loving. It flatters her, feeds her, adores her, until of course the true cost is revealed, her eyes, her freedom, and her soul. The simulation is seductive precisely because it knows what she craves. But like all illusion, it demands surrender. These stories all circle the same paradox. The simulation is often more pleasurable than the truth. The lie is crafted for our comfort. It reflects our desires, fulfills our fantasies, but it also cages us quietly and completely. But now we're living inside these parables. The allegories aren't just on screens, they are the screens. In a world of deepfakes, AI girlfriends, algorithmic content, and synthetic influencers, fiction is becoming prophecy. There are digital celebrities with millions of followers who don't exist. Voice is generated by neural networks. Faces created by code. We don't just consume stories anymore, we live inside them, algorithmically tailored to our tastes, looping endlessly like Truman's Weather or Neo's training programs. Even reality TV has become a hall of mirrors. Shows like Love Island, Too Hot to Handle aren't just edited, they're engineered. Contestants are chosen for their archetypes. Dialogue is manipulated through cuts. The storylines are built like software, modular, reactive, optimized for engagement. We watch these people perform themselves for our entertainment, knowing it's fake and still investing emotionally. It's a simulation within a simulation. Our reactions become data, which shape the next season, the next format, the next iteration. Social media takes us even further. We've all become our own reality shows. Our profiles are trailers. Our posts are episodes. Our lives a season-long arc of branding, collapse, and reinvention. Every choice we make, what to wear, what to say, what to be seen with, is filtered through the lens of audience appeal. The line between authentic and artificial is no longer just blurred, it's irrelevant, and yet we're addicted to the performance, the fantasy of perfection, the dopamine of recognition, like Neo jacking back into the Matrix, or Barbie looking longingly at the simplicity she left behind. Part of us wants the lie. It's safer, easier, and cleaner. Pop culture doesn't just reflect our simulation anxiety, it amplifies it, aestheticizes it, packages it into metaphors we can digest. But it also offers a strange kind of hope, because embedded in every simulation narrative is a moment of awakening, a glitch, a choice, a door. Whether we walk through it is up to us. Chapter 4. History's Glitches, Moments That Felt Like a Simulation. There are moments in history that feel less like they belong to the real world and more like they were lifted from a surrealist film script. Moments so coincidental, so symbolically charged, so impossibly timed, that they seem less like reality and more like a simulation glitch, as if the fabric of the world flickered for a moment, revealing the code beneath. Take November 22nd, 1963, the day President JFK was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. The Zapruder film, endlessly analyzed, shows the impossible, a bullet appearing to curve mid-air, time stuttering in slow motion. The scene plays out like a storyboard from The Matrix, decades before Neo ever dodged a bullet. The motorcade, the crowd, the fatal moment. It has a dreamlike unreality, too cinematic, too clean. In the aftermath, conspiracy theories flourished, not because people were paranoid, but because the official story felt like it was a placeholder in a script with too many plot holes. That eerie feeling, this isn't how real life works, has never quite faded. Fast forward to 2016, when the world watched as a businessman and reality TV star won the US election. Regardless of politics, the moment was undeniably surreal. It felt like a boundary between fiction and reality that has collapsed. What was once a plot twist on television became headline news. The memes, the sound bites, a constant cycle of media coverage. It blurred into something stranger than satire. Many people across the political spectrum described it in similar terms as unreal, like a show, like we're in a simulation. It wasn't just about the person, it was about the atmosphere, the sense that history had taken a sharp left turn into a storyline no one quite expected. This sensation was amplified in 2020 with COVID and the pandemic, when everyday life warped into something dreamlike and unfamiliar. Cities went quiet, schools closed, people attended funerals over Zoom. For a while, time lost its meaning, days blurred, the world paused, but the internet didn't. It accelerated, feeding us headlines, speculation, data, and memes. There was an uncanny rhythm to it all, as if we were stuck in a digital snow globe, watching the world unfold behind the glass. The eeriest moments weren't always the tragic ones, they were the mundane ones made strange. Wiping down groceries, wearing masks in empty parking lots, waving to loved ones from 6 feet apart. And then there were the moments that are just too perfect to ignore. Coincidences so tight they seem designed, like the Titanic being eerily predicted by Futility, a novel written in 1898, 14 years before the real ship sank. The book described an unsinkable ship named Titan that struck an iceberg in April. The parallels are uncanny, enough to make even the most grounded person pause. What is the chance? Or a glitch? Something left in the simulation by mistake? Consider the moon landing in 1969. It was awe-inspiring, profound, but also strangely dislocating. People watched it on grainy television and described it as beautiful, yes, but also hard to believe, like watching fiction. A boot print in the moon dust, a flag planted in a vacuum, Earthrise behind the astronauts. It was real, but it felt like a dream. Even everyday culture reflects this feeling. Reality television, once marketed as unscripted, has grown increasingly edited, stylized, and surreal. Contestants act like archetypes, storylines feel planned. And we, the viewers, watch with a knowing wink. We know it's not fully real, and yet we engage with it emotionally. The same logic has bled into social media. Influencers curate their lives like sets. We filter our faces, stage our routines. Our digital lives are even more polished than our real ones. Over time, it becomes hard to tell which is which. In a more symbolic sense, the boundaries of what feels plausible have loosened. Historical echoes repeat, often too precisely. Political moments mirror each other. Crises lead to crisis. Headlines begin to sound recycled. It's not that time is repeating, it's that reality is starting to feel scripted. The common thread in all these moments, assassinations, elections, and global crises is a quiet internal dislocation. A sensation that something has come undone, not in the world itself, but in our perception of it. That we're briefly stepped outside the narrative and glimpsed the scaffolding holding it all together. And of course, none of this actually proves we're inside a simulation. But it does speak to something deeper, a growing unease with how the world unfolds. When coincidences pile up and events feel stylized, when life feels too much like fiction, we search for patterns, meaning, a framework to make sense of uncanny. And for many, the simulation becomes that metaphor, because the simulation doesn't have to be literal to feel real. It's a story we tell ourselves when the old ones no longer explain the world. Maybe the fear isn't that we're living in a simulation. Maybe the fear is that this is exactly what reality is like. Unpredictable, unfiltered, occasionally unbelievable, and always a little bit stranger than it should be. So maybe the question, are we living in a simulation, isn't meant to be answered. Maybe it's less about science or theory and more about feeling, that creeping sensation that something isn't quite right, that reality as we know it has grown thin at the edges, whether we're avatars in some elaborate digital dream or just humans navigating an increasingly artificial world. The fact is the same: disconnection, disorientation, a flicker in the code, déjà vu that lingers a little too long, time that doesn't move the way it used to. Simulation theory in the end is more than just a philosophical exercise, it's a mirror. It reflects a world that already feels programmed, predictable, packaged, a world where authenticity is increasingly rare, where our choices are nudged by algorithms, and where every moment is filtered for an unseen audience, meaning is sold in templates, truth is edited for engagement, and slowly the borders of reality blur into something that feels less like life and more like content. But maybe deep down we don't really want the truth. Maybe we've grown comfortable inside the simulation, safe in the patterns, soothed by the script. There's comfort in the familiar, in the curated, in the sense that someone or something is watching, guiding, writing, and yet something stirs beneath all that programming. Something raw, something real. We still cry, we still ache, we still remember moments not because they were perfect, but because they felt true. Inexplicably, achingly true. Not content, not code, just human, and perhaps that's the point. If this is a simulation, then every act of love becomes a quiet rebellion. Every unfiltered breath, every unscripted feeling, every wild and irrational burst of emotion, those are our glitches, our cracks in the system, proof that something in us refuses to be controlled. Maybe the goal isn't to escape the simulation at all, but to wake up inside it, to see the patterns, to recognize the rules, to recognize that even within the most controlled environment, there's still room to create chaos, meaning, beauty. So whether this world is real, artificial, or something else entirely, make it yours, make it strange, make it matter. Because even the most sophisticated simulation can't fake a soul that refuses to stay silent. I mean, there have been a lot of things, I swear, kind of more post 2020, where sometimes I question reality. So thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What your thoughts? Do you feel like you're living in a simulation? I just feel like for me, things got weird, like post 2020, where I feel like things are getting more like I feel that way. So I just wanted to make this video essay to kind of get my thoughts out on the subject. All right, thanks for watching.